the TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
It really has paid off for me my entire career. I have gotten opportunities and connections and things that it only came about because I had this attitude of, everybody's good till proven bad and say yes until you have a reason to say no. Many people have quite the opposite attitude, that everybody's bad until proven good and you should say no until you're convinced to say yes. And that's not how I roll.
In this episode, our guest contributes a lot of his success to something that he actually considers to be a personal flaw rather than a talent. We talk about all the challenges that he encountered in his 30 years career path as a chief evangelist, and we speak about why he considers his podcast Remarkable People to be his best writing project to date. Enjoy this interview with Guy Kawasaki. I'm relatively new to the exciting world that is called podcasting. Thus far, it has been a wonderful adventure speaking to so many different and very interesting guests, editing our interviews to perfection, adding the music, writing up the show notes, and then rolling the drums on social media to our community to make sure the world knows who we are. I, for one, absolutely love it. And even though it is still very early days with episode 10 of our first season, I do believe I found a new passion. But my next guest excels in it. His podcast series, Remarkable People, is an oasis of calm in the ever-growing desert of rapid, virtual, bite-sized information that is flying around us. As a listener of Remarkable People, you are allowed to take a bit more time and to listen. Genuinely listen and then reflect. Its host, Guy Kawasaki, is known for a lot more than just his podcast. Former chief evangelist at Apple, current chief evangelist at Canva, author of 15 books such as The Art of the Start 2.0, The Art of Social Media, Enchantment, and Wise Guy. Guy is also known as a venture capital investor and lectures as an executive fellow of the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley and adjunct professor of the University of New South Wales. Loads of things to do, all next to being a father of 4 and undoubtedly being a loving husband to his wife, Beth. Personally, I would describe Guy as an absolute gentleman, someone who has managed to create this big-hearted online omnipresence that makes us all feel good. Guy speaks and writes with a lot of grace and style, but in a very grounded and approachable way. He's also focused on genuinely adding value to any conversation he's involved in, sharing something new and positive with the millions of people who follow him on social media or listen to his podcast. Guy Kawasaki very much deserves all the buzz that is going on around him. And yes, I also want to be a Guy Kawasaki when I grow up. But my guest remains very normal through all of this, soberly answering the following to a New York Times journalist curious to find out a secret. Success in business comes from the willingness to grind it out. It's not because of the brilliant idea. It's because you're willing to work hard. That's the key to my success. Wise words spoken by a wise guy. Mr. Kawasaki, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. It's quite the intro.
Well, and I meant it all. I've been doing my research. I've been reading up. I've been listening to the Remarkable People podcast. And again, I have to say you do it with such consideration, such compassion, I think, which makes it really flourish. So thanks for doing this. And I have to say, Remarkable People is very much, I love how it's been put together. You know, it's a very kind of quiet, calm style of interviewing. You leave a lot of space for your guests. And I also like how you put in this little background music at certain moments that makes it all kind of, you know, like water dripping or something like that, which just puts you, it's almost meditative.
Credit for that belongs to Jeff C., who is the sound designer. That's nothing to do with me. That's his talent, not mine.
Okay. Well, credits to him then. It most definitely works. But how did you get into podcasting, Guy?
I got into podcasting because I was releasing a new book called Wise Guy. And in the process of releasing the new book, I was interviewed by dozens of podcasters. And I kept asking them how podcasting works. How do they make money podcasting, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, yeah, I ought to try this. And so I just decided to try it one day.
Wow. And I mean, you did not only try, big victory, because you're now on episode 90 or something. You're quite like far ahead with all the interviews. So when did you discover that you really liked it?
Oh, about episode 2.
Okay.
No, I think that my work as a podcaster is probably the best work I've ever done in my career. And I've done a lot of stuff. So yeah, I really do. I think it's the best.
Yeah. What I like about it is, as I said, like there's lots of information is flying around and it's all so fickle, so quick. And a podcast is really kind of, okay, take a breath, just pause and reflect. And it fits into our world. It fits into this fast-paced world. We understand that we need to take time to listen to a podcast.
I hope people understand, or maybe now they'll learn, that my podcast is roughly an hour. I probably put in 2 hours prep, say 2 hours in the interview is 4, another 3 hours editing, 7. I probably put 7 to 10 hours, just me, not counting the sound design. I probably put 7 to 10 hours per hour of podcast. So if people think podcasting is as simple as turning on the microphone or turning on the recorder and pressing a button and then uploading it, not for me anyway. That's not how I roll.
No, most definitely not. From experience, I know there's so much that comes with it. I wanted to talk to you about social media because, you know, you've written about it. You're obviously very good at it, the way you express yourself on social media and kind of all the things that you share on all these outlets that are there, all these platforms that are there. And you've been doing it for a while. And one of the first things I thought is like, well, if there is such a thing, you could be considered somewhat of a veteran in the use of social media. Have you noticed Have you noticed any changes? Is there anything new that has come to the horizon, or have there been any changes on social media that you say, well, back in the olden days, it went like this?
Probably the newest thing is this social audio thing, Clubhouse and things like that. I've tried Clubhouse. I've tried Twitter's version of Clubhouse. I've used it. I can't tell you that I have fallen in love with it. I tried to go, hot and heavy for Clubhouse for a few weeks, and then I just stopped.
Yeah.
It's an interesting format, and it just, for better or for worse, there is no polish to it. So it is what you say. It's not really recorded. There's no archives. So you're either there or you're not there. You're either listening or you're not listening, and there's no editing, so that can all be good, but I'm coming from a world of podcasting where it's a completely different world.
And are you on TikTok?
No, I'm too old for TikTok.
No dancing videos.
No.
And, have there been any platforms that you very much like that are non-existent or changed into anything?
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely loved Google Plus. Oh, yeah. And I'm really sad that Google killed Google Plus. I think they killed it too early.
Yes. Yeah.
For a company of the size of Google, maybe Google Plus was just sort of a rounding error. It wasn't worth the trouble.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
No, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. I think it was just too noisy with Google Plus and Facebook, which in my perspective, they worked somewhat similar.
You have a point there, that's for sure.
Yeah. And what about the way people express themselves on social media? So I can imagine that when you started on social media, was it already so noisy when it came to kind of, things that they call fake news or alternative facts or whatever, or is that more a phenomenon of the later years?
I think it's more a phenomenon of the later years, but I also think that that's just how any popular medium evolves. So if you took an extreme example, and I hope I'm historically right, when Gutenberg invented the printing press, they only printed Bibles. So you could say, okay, so that, that's as good as it gets. And now, hundreds of years later, there's porn, there's conspiracy theories, there's, just crap that's printed on printing presses, much less blogs and websites. So it would be like asking Gutenberg, so at the beginning of printing press, was quality higher than now? And the answer would be yes. But so I think the same thing would be true of the web, social media, and whatever happens next. That's just the way it is.
How do you think it's going to evolve? Is it just going to get noisier and more messy, or you think at a certain point people are just going to block it, or it's going to be all cleaned up?
I think people will just at some point, get used to and know what to ignore. I could build the case that when you hand your child a phone, you should also tell them, listen, don't believe everything you get on this phone. And so there needs to be, we teach people, longhand, we teach people algebra. We should teach them digital literacy, that just because a website ends in .org doesn't mean it's a for good, not for profit. It means that they registered a .org. That's all it means. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up digital literacy, because that's what we as TeachPitch are invested in, bringing digital skills to mainly educators and teachers all over the world. And we 100% agree that that's an important thing. That's something that, that needs to be done on all levels for us to better understand how technology is going to impact the way we live and how it's going to impact the way we work. And, every step of the way, we need to understand it. I just want to mention an example. Just the other day on Twitter, I saw a book author, and I think she's a one-time published author, and she got a review on Goodreads, which is a notable platform, very good platform. But the review, sadly, it was kind of a hate bot. So the review really said something extremely nasty about her book, and she was pleading on Twitter for Goodreads to take it away. And I felt so sorry for her, because I was really like, you're so dependent on those reviews. Those reviews are important for an author who just starts out. And then this bot comes along. I'm not going to say aloud what it said, but it came down to it that the author was racist, which it was not at all true. Kind of, it was just, something. And she was pleading, it's like, Goodreads, can you please take this off?
She did that publicly, obviously.
Well, I think she had written to Goodreads a couple of times before, but there was no response apparently. So she was now kind of desperate and trying to express her dissatisfaction on Twitter to see kind of, maybe someone will pick up on it there, right? Or maybe other people will join her. Anyway.
Listen, with my writing and my podcast, believe me, there are reviews, maybe not as heinous as that, but there are negative reviews about my writing and my podcast. And my advice is, first of all, you're complaining. If you think that someone at Goodreads or Twitter or, wherever is eventually going to say, oh yeah, he or she's right, we need to delete that.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to the other crap that they let go, you think that Jack Dorsey's worried about a bad book review?
Yeah. No, of course.
So that's number one. And number two, when you are the author or the podcaster, you read this kind of negative thing or positive thing, frankly, either way. And you think, oh my God, the world is perfect information. Now everybody has read that negative comment, or now everybody has read that positive comment.
Yeah.
And I have learned that hardly anybody has read either comment. And even if they did read it, it hardly had any effect on them. So, one positive Goodreads review is not going to make you a New York Times bestseller. And one negative Goodreads review is not going to ruin your book.
Yeah.
Because frankly, there's so much noise. In a sense, maybe instead of trying to cure things with reducing bad stuff, it should just increase bad stuff. So there's so much bad stuff, people ignore it all.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I would not make myself crazy, although, I'm at a different stage in life, so maybe it does.
No, these are wise words. No, very wise words, Guy. And I think, you're very right, but I can also empathize with the author. Yeah. So we're going to dive into the first challenge. But before I do so, I wanted to say one thing, Guy, which is also a testimony to you, is I just started with a podcast. I think in all, I did 20 odd interviews. And I always ask for all my guests for the challenges. And you're the first one that interpreted the challenges as personal flaws or where there's room for improvement. Yeah. Other people have always sent me external factors as challenges. So things that happened to them in their career. And you're the first one that interpreted it as, here's where I'm challenged, which I think is also a great way of looking at it, because of course you take those with you everywhere. They could be a sort of a recurring challenge and therefore very interesting to discuss.
Wait. So let me get this straight. So when you ask other people about their challenges, they would say that, I don't have enough income? Or, what would be an example of what the other 20 people said?
So our first guest that we introduced, she was the first female president of Ecuador. Okay. And so she said so she said there was a coup, right? Okay. So that ended basically her reign as president. So that's an example. Another guest basically said, I grew up in less fortunate circumstances. But basically the core of it is that it's always kind of something that happened externally that they wanted to talk about. So it's like this came on their path. That was therefore their challenge, right? So, and they're equally valid. They're equally good and equally valuable. But you're the first one who interprets as, okay, what are my personal challenges that I need to overcome, which I think is good. And I think it also fits with how you've written Wise Guy, where you share so many wisdoms about, things that happened to you and how you overcame them and kind of what your lessons learned are from there.
A couple of reactions for that. First of all, I have led a charmed life. So when you ask people, the gist of the question is, why are you successful? There's some people who just believe that they're freaking brilliant, right? And they, that. There's some people who think that, they just deserved it because, I don't know, the hardest thing they have to do is be fertilized as an egg and then they deserve what they got. And there's other people who believe they just worked hard. They just gritted it out. And I used to be in that camp. I used to say, I attribute my success to my hard work. And now I'm in a different camp. I attribute most of my success to just good luck. I was born in a family that cherished education. My parents sacrificed for my education. That education led to opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And if I were born in another family in another time, I would not be what I am. And so a lot of it is just, I hit the lottery. Now, to be true, I hit the lottery and then I made the most of it. But I no longer go through life thinking, Guy, you deserve it because you just work so hard. Not anymore.
No, credits to you for saying that. And more of our guests have said it. It's like, listen, luck played a very big part for me to tell you where I am today. Like it really contributed to my success today. And you'd be lying if you would say that luck had nothing to do with it. I believe Obama also said it in a recent interview. It's like, listen, luck is an important factor, and whoever says that, that's not a contributing factor is lying through his or her teeth. It's true, but you made the most out of it. And I think that's also worth some credits.
There's an ancient Chinese saying that you have to stand by the side of a river with your mouth open for a long time before the Peking duck will fly into it.
Okay, yeah. I love that. Yeah. For a very, very long time, I can imagine.
Very long time, yes.
Yeah. Your first challenge, Guy, you say you have a weak ability to prioritize.
Yeah.
What do you mean with that?
Well, sometimes too much time is the enemy of productivity. So, I know that first thing in the morning, I should do the most important things, which is edit my podcast, or like right now, I'm sitting on about 4 or 5 invoices. I know I should get that done and all that. But, first thing I do is I check social media, I check news, and I check email. Okay, so there goes half a day. And I know I'm sub-optimizing my productivity. Now, it just happens that I am willing to work very hard so I can overcome my inefficiency. But I know I'm not optimal in doing that. That's number one.
Would you say do you thrive when you have lots of things to do? So are you someone that, needs the pressure of, okay, too many things ongoing, and then you thrive because you all need to do them quickly so you don't meet deadlines, or are you the other way around?
I can't tell you that I, intentionally create a lot of deadlines for myself. There are a lot of deadlines in my life, but I'm not trying to overload myself in order to accomplish them. You can look at my life from the outside looking in. You can take the same facts and draw completely different conclusions. So I live in Santa Cruz, California, and, what I did this morning so far is surf. So I got in at 9:45 to get on this interview. So you could say, Guy, you're just living the life. You surf, you do your podcast for a while. I mean, you do someone else's podcast, you edit podcasts, you answer a few emails, you're done, right? You don't have to suck up in a company meeting. You don't have to talk to your boss. You don't have to talk to customers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one way of looking at my life. Another way of looking at my life is, I have to turn out a good podcast every week. I speak a few times every week. If you just told people you have to make 50 to 100 speeches a year, many people would freak out right there, right? But that's just the baseline for me.
Yeah. You're obviously good at it. It's something you thrive in, right? You have a beautiful way with words. So this comes natural.
No, that does not come natural. Don't kid yourself.
Oh, okay.
So, I started speaking publicly maybe in 1987 or so. And it was very intimidating because I had worked for Steve Jobs. And if you work for Steve Jobs, how do you stack up against Steve Jobs as a communicator? And so from 1987 on, I've been speaking, and today is 2021. So, that is 33 years. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So that's 33 years or 34, whatever. It's 30-something years, right? I can't even do math in my head anymore. So it's 30-something years. Yeah, I'm an instant success at speaking.
Yeah. No, okay. You've got 30-something years of practice.
Yeah.
But
you better be good after 30-something years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's true, but you have a knack for communication. I don't know if it's words but also, in the intro I said it looks nice. It looks graceful, how you express yourself. And therefore I think it has a contagious effect on others, in a good way. People want to find out more. So you can raise curiosity in a way. I don't know if it's with words or with a picture or with an expression or whatever it is, but it's a nice way of doing it.
The purpose of my podcast is to help people learn from remarkable people to improve their lives.
Yeah.
And now I'm not saying that they should learn from me. They should learn from my guests. I bet you if you did an analysis of, length of time Guy's talking versus length of time guest is talking, it's got to be 90% guest, 10% Guy. Because it's all about tapping the wisdom of other people. The name of my podcast is not Remarkable Guy. It's Remarkable People.
Yeah, 100%. So that's your first challenge, a weak ability to prioritize because you have a great life. And, it's sometimes hard to say, what am I going to do first? And then the second one, which I thought was so funny because, in reading Wise Guy, you speak a lot about something you call default to yes.
Yes.
And I so love that expression because it's basically say yes to life, say yes to people who come on your path. You also say something which I think is very beautiful, that is say thank you to people while they're still around or while you're still in contact with them, because you never know how things are going to go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, go for it, do it.
Yeah.
And then as your challenge, you write down, I have a weak ability to say no. So I go like, duh, yeah, if you're a default to yes man, I can believe that.
I'm on the podcast, right? I said yes.
Yeah, there you go. But why would you consider that to be a challenge? Because I see it as a talent.
Well, I can see how you could see it as a talent, but I will tell you that, it's a challenge for me, but on the other hand, it really has paid off for me my entire career. I have gotten opportunities and connections and things that it only came about because I had this attitude of, everybody's good till proven bad, and say yes until you have a reason to say no. Many people have quite the opposite attitude, that everybody's bad until proven good, and you should say no until you're convinced to say yes. And that's not how I roll.
And you said also yes to which I think, I don't know if you coined that principle, but that chief evangelism. So that's also saying yes fully to a product, right? That's kind of, going the extra mile for a product that you love, which was Apple where you started, and now it's Canva. Could you talk a little bit more about, the yes in that evangelism?
Yeah, so evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bringing the good news. So what an evangelist does is bring the good news. I brought the good news of Macintosh, how it would make people more creative and productive. Now I'm bringing the good news of Canva, how it makes you a better communicator because it has democratized design. So to be a good evangelist, you have to love the product. That's 90% of the battle. And the other 90% of the battle is it has to be a great product.
Yeah, and how do you know from the outset that it is a great product?
You don't.
What are factors you look at? You don't.
No, I mean, if it was a science, more people would be chief evangelists. No, it's a lot of, again, getting back to it, it's luck. I mean, luck. I got my job in the Macintosh division because of my college roommate, not because I surveyed the potential technologies in 1983 and picked Macintosh. Macintosh found me because of my college roommate. And Canva reached out to me because my social media producer was using Canva. It's not because I picked them out. They found me.
Yeah, so it's luck. And have you ever evangelized something that didn't go as you expected?
Well, many times.
Okay.
You could sum up my career very quickly. At the start, there was Macintosh, and at the end, there was Canva. And between those two, there was a lot of thrashing.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. So you've looked at other product and tried to, see if it would catch on, and in some cases it just didn't. Yeah. I want to stay with no now, the word no, because you come across very balanced. You come across as someone who is, as you said before, is having a great life and has had many opportunities and whatever more. But what today makes you say no? Or what I'm more interested in is what could make you really angry? What can really, show another face to Guy Kawasaki is like, okay, I've had enough of this.
Well, stupidity.
Okay.
No, that's the top of the list. Selfishness would be right up there. And we see that right now in just an inordinate amount, right? So, case in point, vaccination. I mean, by what logic should you refuse to vaccinate? Because you believe Bill Gates has put a chip in the vaccine that's going to track you? Meanwhile, you got your iPhone and Tim Cook is tracking you. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to track you, get rid of your phone. If that's what you're worried about, get rid of your phone. There's no chip in the vaccine. And this concept that there's this trade-off between personal freedom and the common good, and common good, no pun intended, should always trump personal freedom. This thing about I won't wear a mask because it impinges on my freedom. The flip side of that is I'm putting all these kids under 12 who cannot be vaccinated at risk, and people who are literally unable to get vaccinated because of some other medical condition, or maybe they live in Africa so that, they can't get the vaccine. But you in America, you could go down to your CVS store and get it in the next half hour, but you don't want to, and you don't want to wear a mask because of personal freedom is utterly ridiculous and selfish.
Hmm. So that gets you angry.
Can you tell?
Yeah. Little bit. No, but it's good. And 100%. It's one thing if you say, well, it's me personally and I choose not to do this, but now we're in a situation whereby you're impacting other people. So yeah, that gets you angry. Anything else?
That's about it.
That's about it. And then your third challenge. So basically your book, Wise Guy, that I could highly recommend. It was published in 2019. So
no, that recent? No.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
2019. That's what I've read. Yeah.
It's only 21. No, it can't be. That cannot. Well, I don't even have one around here to look.
It's one of your 15 books, Guy. I think 2019. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, wait. I have one here. I found one. You're right. Wow. Okay, 2019, like I told
2019, There you go. It's good that you don't know. You've written so many books, but this is kind of the latest one. But in it, you basically describe a series of challenges that you encountered, or you describe your career path, and then at the end of it, you describe something you call wisdoms.
Yes.
And you share them with the reader. What I loved about the book is that, like you, it's very grounded. It's pretty consistent with now talking to you and then reading the book. And it reminded me a little bit of Principles of Ray Dalio in a way. I hope you don't mind me saying that, but of course it's in a different style. You know, it's not the hedge fund billionaire approach, but the Principles also has these things that he basically lifts things up to kind of higher values for everyone to understand. And that's what you're trying to do with your wisdoms, which I very much liked and appreciated. And sometimes you're very grounded in your approach. Sometimes you say luck, but you also mention a couple of times nepotism. So this was nepotism. I didn't do anything nepotism. So I'm like, okay, wow. That's,
at least I'm honest.
You're honest. Yeah, you're honest. Very, very good. And so you say like, there's nothing fancy about this. And sometimes you're very loving and passionate and considerate. Well, and I earlier mentioned the example is like, thank people that you want to thank, or make sure they know you're grateful, because you never know how things go. And while you can do that, and there's no reason for you not to. What brought you the idea of Wise Guy? Why did you want to write Wise Guy?
Well, I believe you should write a book when you have something to say, as opposed to when you think you want to position yourself as a thought leader. So I was inspired by, books like Chicken Soup for the Soul and other books that told stories. I don't want people to get the impression that this is an autobiography or a memoir that, starts from day one and just shows you a clear and direct and straight path towards success because I did everything right in my life. A, that's not true. And B, it's not organized chronologically. It's organized more by subject, parenting versus education versus work, as opposed to let me just tell you how awesome I am by telling you my life story. That's not the point. I want people to read a story from me and say, okay, so, I can apply that wisdom to my life. That's it. No more than that.
And the response, I can imagine, has been very good to the book. Did it catch on the way you wanted for people to catch on?
No author has ever had a book catch on the way he or she wanted. I would love to sell 50 million copies. Did I do that? No.
No. Okay,
I'm thinking about 49,750,000 or more less.
Yeah.
Wasn't even close.
No, but that's in the sale.
It is what it is.
Yeah, but that's reflected in the sales, but maybe that, on the level of feedback that you got from people, was there surprising feedback in there or anything that you said, wow?
Very positive. And you know what? In a sense, the same thing is true with my podcast. So my podcast gets an episode over time will get, 20 to 30,000 downloads. Okay. So for most podcasters, that would be an enormous success. Mm-hmm. But if I look at Joe Rogan or other podcasters who get 5 million downloads, you have to say, well, is Joe Rogan's podcast 20 times better than yours? Well, I don't think, is it 20 or 200 times? I mean, I don't think so. It's actually 200 times. So, but this is an interesting question because I've struggled with this question mentally. Like, I think it's my best work. How come it's not listened to more? So yesterday I interviewed Seth Godin and I told him this and he said, guy, your problem is you're confusing popularity with quality. The two are not the same. And, just because something's popular doesn't mean it's good. And just because something's good doesn't mean it's popular. So now I'm at peace with that.
That's good. And I would like to congratulate you on 20 to 30,000 downloads. That's an amazing number. And I think if you stick to it, it'll grow even further. I'm sure it will because it's a really unique thing and the way you do it and the way you set it up. Also who you are as a person. I know it's 90-10 in division of the guest talking and you talking, but you do bring a lot to the table also for your guests because your guests, they know you in some shape or form, right? Mm-hmm. If people know you by association or they know you from previous jobs that you had or whatever it is, and that makes you unique. Other than that, I would give you the advice of a guy called Guy Kawasaki, is believe in yourself, and go for who you want to be, don't try to be Joe Rogan,
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm going to do this podcast. That's not the issue, but, I would be lying to you if I told you that I don't care about the number of subscribers. I do. Yeah. It's a way of keeping score.
Yeah. And it is important and I'm sure it will grow and the quality, everything's in there. So, I'm a big fan and I'll continue binging on the episode. Okay. So that's one more download you can count on.
Thank you. Thank you.
In terms of the book, so I just want to go very quickly back to Wise Guy. When we talk about reading and writing, because you're a great writer. You've written 15 books and at some point you say listen, the reading and writing, that comes very close together. For you, it comes very close together. So when you read, you almost want to write as well. Do I have that correctly?
I have to admit, it's getting less and less true. I do less and less reading. And it's because, I believe that one of the things I need to do is to fight the trend in America to reduce democracy and meritocracy and to turn America into a fascist state. I think that is a huge threat. And if anybody doesn't believe that, go look at what happened on January 6th, 2021. Mm-hmm. And so I believe I have a moral obligation to resist fascism in America. And so I spent a lot of time curating content about that, in how to preserve freedom, how to fight the suppression of voting rights, those kinds of things. And then I also believe I have a moral obligation to help fight the pandemic. And so I spend most of my time doing that if I'm not editing my podcasts. Actually, I do that and then I add my podcast when everything else is over. So this means that I hardly do any reading. I hardly do any reading of nonfiction. I do read fiction, Lee Child and David Baldacci. I read, can't remember the author right now, but his protagonist is a guy named Gabriel Allon, or Allon. I don't know how you even pronounce it. And he's in charge of the Israeli Mossad. And he's an art restorer and he's, fighting the enemies of Israel around the world. And, I love that stuff. The reason why I don't read nonfiction is when I read nonfiction, I read nonfiction because I'm doing research for a book I'm writing.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things I learned from Apple is you got to know what to steal. And so I'm reading for information. I'm also reading to get ideas on how to write something. But I generally don't read nonfiction except for my podcast. So for my podcast, I have to read maybe 2 or 3 books a week because, if you're interviewing Seth Godin, you need to see what he just wrote about. And just about everybody I interview has written a book. So, that means there's at least 52 books a year I'm reading.
Yeah.
But I don't read nonfiction outside of that, really, because I've just tapped out.
So you're reading a lot. You started, your answer by saying, I don't read a lot anymore, but you by default read 50
I just
books.
came to that realization.
You just don't consider that, yeah. But what I think you're saying is that when you read it, you want to put it to use immediately. If you read nonfiction, you want to do something with it, whereas you don't have that when you read a crime novel, because then you basically say, well, that's such a fantasy world, and I'm just enjoying this. I don't have to kind of reproduce each word myself or something.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's fair enough. And I do recognize what you're saying about when you read something and it inspires you, it can trigger you so much that it's like a strong cup of coffee. You want to kind of do something with it immediately. Yeah. That's fair enough.
To be bluntly honest, most nonfiction books are lousy. And so that's a waste of time. And then for the few that are good, then I would get depressed because, that person is a much better writer than I am. So there's not too much upside there.
Yeah. That's true. So you either the mood is ruined or you're too jealous. That's those two options. Yeah. I can imagine. Well, thank you so much.
Shallow but true.
Yeah. No, it's fair, and that's honesty. Honesty will get us far.
To be even more honest, that's why I never watch other keynote speakers, because most speakers are lousy. And then if I watch someone who's good and better than me, then I get depressed because then I think, oh God, I need to up my game.
Yeah, but can you watch them and say, okay, I'm going to copy this? Can you be jealous and then write up, okay, but I'm going to steal this anyways?
Well, I use a top 10 format. I took that from David Letterman, but that's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, let me say that I am not above stealing good ideas.
Yeah. That's good. Guy Kawasaki. We'll put that on the, make that a slogan.
You can tweet that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Guy. This is a great wisdom. 2 very last questions.
Yes.
One is, it has to do with reading.
Yeah.
If you could recommend one book to our listeners, which book would that be? Can be your own book, I'm afraid.
It would be If You Want to Write by Brenda Ullin. It is written for writers to become writers and to, escape the negativity, sometimes internal, sometimes external, to become a writer. And now many people are not writers, but if you're a programmer, if you're a movie maker, if you're a musician, if you're a marketing person, if you're a salesperson, just put in any verb you want in there. This book is an empowering book. It truly empowered me to become a writer, and it can empower anybody to be anything, I think. So that's the book I would recommend. Brenda Ullin, If You Want to Write. And then the very last question, Guy, and I ask this to all my guests, but in your case, you have a podcast series. So the question is always, now we turn the tables. This is your podcast. Who would you want to invite as your next guest? But all my previous guests did not have a podcast series. You have one. So who would you like to have across from you for a next interview for Remarkable People? Stacey Abrams. Okay. Yeah. Nice. And is that anywhere on the horizon? No, I don't know. I don't have a way to get there. She's marvelous. Yeah. She's amazing. Well, seriously, I think she may have saved democracy with her work in Georgia. I really do. Yeah. And she's a novelist, kind of, writing under another name, and she does so many things. She's definitely a remarkable person. So, that's a very good choice. That's a very good choice. Thank you so much for your time, Guy.
thank you very much for this interview. Again, I would highly recommend Remarkable People, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, and binge on it, of course, next to our podcast series. But as a second choice, definitely recommend Remarkable People. Guy Kawasaki, thank you very much.
Okay, you have a great day, and good luck editing this.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.